Well, I've got three folks who are joining me here on the chancel steps, and as they're coming, I've got bad news and I've got good news. And we're going to start with the bad news first. The bad news is this is a stewardship interview. The good news is it's really exciting what we get to talk about today. This is not scary stuff. This is the good stuff that's happening here. And let me introduce to you, standing in the middle, Brad Mitchell is here as a member of the Building and Grounds Committee. To his right, Barry Buchanan is chair of the Missions Committee this year. And then next to me is my cohort in crime, and good. As we're working together, Gladys Kolonowski and I are co-chairing the Sustain initiative out of Vision 2020, which is behind the unified budget and a lot of the things that are going to help move us forward. And so what we want to talk about today are some of the really great things that are happening now in 2015 because of what we did in the last half of 2014. Last year, we introduced the unified budget, and you've seen the buckets, and you're aware of all of the imagery that we've done with that, and we were able to fill all those buckets by the end of the year, and that means that we are on our way to doing some really great things. And I want to start with Barry, because I think of all the excitement, what's happening with Missions Committee is just revolutionary. So Barry, what's the result for Missions Committee on the unified budget and some extra money that you have this year?
Well, the extra money is wonderful because it gives us a chance to fund some additional missions opportunities that are more entrepreneurial and developmental in nature. The Missions Committee has been very busy so far this year. We've developed a process to collect and evaluate and select Missions Plus opportunities that go beyond our normal missions operating budget criteria.
So we have we're still funding all the things we've done in missions before, and now this year, from last year's, you have $100,000 set aside in the Missions Plus fund, and you guys are treating this sort of like a foundation. You're going to make grants out of that, right?
Yes, we are. We will have all of the requests for these funds. We've asked that they be submitted no later than the last of April. We will spend the month of May and part of June evaluating and ranking those requests. And by July, we hope to have all of the funds allocated out so that we can see some good results on each of these new initiatives before the end of the year. And the committee has promised that we will provide regular updates to the congregation on the progress of these new mission opportunities.
So Barry, just quickly, one other question. How do these things differ from the things that we're regularly funding in the missions budget? What makes them different?
Well, they're different in that they are essentially a one-time grant where our missions operating budget items normally can continue for several years. We want them to be new initiatives that could not otherwise be done without this additional funding. And there are so many needs out there, both locally and statewide, nationwide, and even some international opportunities that we'll be reviewing.
Wow, that's, for me, this is one of the most exciting things about the unified budget and our expanded missions footprint with this. Barry, thank you and the Missions Committee for that. And let's turn to Brad next, representing Building and Grounds, which also a whole new way of doing things, right? We have this thing called the Building Reserve Fund. And I think that's sort of a nice little concept to most people, but what does that mean practically? What are some of the issues that you guys are dealing with this year?
Okay, this year we're dealing with the sound system here in the sanctuary is one. It was kind of unforeseen and it just came up. There's the sprinkler system that we were asked by the city of Dallas to fix when we did the previous renovation. And there's ongoing maintenance to the facility that we're trying to budget so we don't have to have we don't do capital campaigns anymore.
Yeah, so the idea here is that if we chart out our renovation and repair expenses, we don't have to come to the church every 3 years and say, oh, we need about $4 million
Correct.
to do stuff, right?
Correct. We had a study done that kind of outlined all outlined the facility and everything in it so that we could plan in the future to replace things, to repair things, instead of, oh my gosh, this broke and now we have an emergency.
Yeah, so one of the other things that's on the docket that in this new way of thinking is sometime soon we need to renovate the chapel.
Yes, we do. And
That's an agenda item, and so we're trying to, how do we do that without a capital campaign?
exactly.
Right?
Hmm.
So our gifts to the unified budget help make all this possible while providing more missions funds. And then to pass the microphone to Gladys, on top of that, we get to fund the Pathways to Ministry program, right? Gladys?
Absolutely.
What's that about?
The Pathways to Ministry program has become a core defining mission of our church. Just over 12 years ago, we began that program, and it now has allowed us to see ourselves as a teaching church with hands-on in the development of the pastors of the future, our future generations. For the first decade of the program, it was externally funded by the Lilly Endowment, allowing us to get our own financial house in order, pay off our debts. But now the operations of Pathways to Ministry has moved into our budget. So fully funding the unified budget,
That's good.
unified budget means that we fully fund all 4 pastoral residents, as well as our youth-focused Your Call program. And we can continue doing as we have done in the past, but with internal funding.
So now there's another part of this, Gladys, and folks have heard us talk about the George A. Mason Pathways Endowment. Is that funded through the unified budget?
It is not funded through the unified budget. The George A. Mason Pathways to Ministry Endowment is one of the few additional appeals. And so we have the opportunity to set as a goal for our 2020 vision reaching the level of endowment that would fully fund the Pathways to Ministry program without operational funds in our budget. If we can achieve that goal, which Gwen Morris will tell you, the sooner we get there, the less we have to give because the investment income will take us to the top. If we fully fund that endowment at $10 million in 2020, then we can move the operational funds out of our budget and open up more funds for missions. In missions we haven't even thought of yet as a church.
Well, so this is really exciting. I told you this was good news, right? All the good that we get to do. And the way this happens is when we all give faithfully, and not just with a basic offering, but what we had asked the congregation last year was to think about your previous giving, both in regular budget offering and in capital campaigns. We're not having capital campaigns, but if you would give more than you gave to the budget, and maybe not as much as you gave to the budget in capital campaign, all of you, wouldn't that be great, right? We can do this together. So one last question for each of you, just quickly. Knowing what you know from the inside of this, how does this encourage you in your own stewardship and desire to be part of this?
My husband Bobby and I have been married 40 years. Our will was signed when I was 30 years old. Our primary beneficiaries at that time were our parents. We had the opportunity to rethink who would be the primary beneficiaries of our will, and Bobby is an attorney. How long did it take for us to make this decision? So we have the opportunity to determine whether the funds at the end of our life are large or small. What portion of those will be invested in the George A. Mason Pathways to Ministry Endowment Fund?
Wow, wonderful. Brad?
It's always a challenge to give, and we're faced with it every day. And my wife and I are totally committed to this church. It's number one on our giving,
Yeah.
and it will always be.
Thank you. Barry?
As we've talked with our mission partners and others, we have realized how many wonderful opportunities there are to expand Wilshire's work, doing God's work in the community. But all of those extra opportunities require funds. Our goal is to make sure that Missions Plus funding is not a one and done deal. We want to do this every year because it fits Wilshire's mantle of a missional church.
Wow, thank you guys. Thank you each for your leadership in the church. Thank you for your good word. And I told you this was good news, not scary. All right, thanks.